Spring MVC controllers, part 1. So here we're going to cover what a controller is, and we'll talk about request mapping, and we'll talk about method arguments and the concept of implicit models. Basically, model object gets created by the Spring MVC framework, and it will be passed on to your handler as an argument so that you can add attributes. And then we'll talk about return type for view selection. In fact, there are several ways of selecting a view. So we'll see all those ways of selecting a view. So what is a controller? So controller is basically responsible for handling incoming HTTP requests. So controller has a set of handlers or handler methods, and each HTTP request is going to be mapped to a handler of a controller. So particular method, handler method, is responsible for handling a HTTP request. So controllers handle HTTP requests. So controller receives user input and transforms into a model. If you are handling a form submission, then the data that is coming from the client will be transformed into a model object. That is what is called the data binding and type conversion. And controller performs a business logic and then set the model attributes. As I said before, these model attributes are key value pairs. And those model attributes are now accessible in the view. So typically controller will delegate the business logic processing to a set of services instead of handling it itself. Okay, so that's a business delegation design pattern. You do not want to have a business logics to be handled by the controller. The role of the controller is just receiving user interaction request, meaning request from the client, and then delegate the business logic processing to a service, and then the service comes back with some kind of return, and then it will just be responsible for sending back the response. So it should be able to be responsible just for request handling and response handling, and all the business logic should be delegated to the services. And these services typically in turn access databases through DAO interface or repository interface. Okay, so let's see how we can specify the mapping rules. Basically, you're going to use request mapping annotation to specify what controller and what handler method in the controller is responsible for handling which request. So request mapping annotation is used to map a URL to a handler method of a controller class. Okay, so URL will actually specify which controller and which method of controller will be chosen to handle the request. Request mapping annotation can be specified at the class level or method level. If you specify a method level, the request mapping, that will be concatenated to the one that is specified in the request level. So we'll see that example in this slide. So in this page, you see request mapping is specified at the class level. So request mapping and /appointment, meaning any URL that start with the appointment will be handled by this controller. And you know that controller has to be annotated with a controller annotation. Okay, so it does have a controller annotation and request mapping annotation at the class level. Okay, and then we have two methods here. We have a get method and we have a get for day method. So this method has its own request mapping annotation, and you can specify the HTTP method. In this case, it will handle HTTP GET request. Okay, so but it doesn't have its own URL fragment. So this is the method that will handle this URL. So in this case, we have localhost colon 8080, and my app is basically application context, meaning identification of your application, and then appointments. So this is the method that will handle this URL. Now if we want to handle another URL that has this number, like a /4/5 and things like that, then we should have another method that has request mapping, and then we have this value, in this case this day. This is what is called the URL template, right? So it will actually capture this 4 and 5 as day variable, so that you could use it in your code, okay? And we're going to talk about that later on in detail. So by having this request mapping annotation in your class level or at the method level, you could actually specify this is the method that will handle a particular URL. So in this case, this day will be concatenated with this class level request mapping value. So in this case, it should handle appointment/4, appointment/5, and things like that. Is this clear? It's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so method level request mapping value should be concatenated to the class level request mapping value. This is an example where we have request mapping annotation only at the method level. So here we have a clinic controller which doesn't have request mapping annotation at the class level, but the method itself has request mapping annotation. So in this case, this one is handling root URL. So it will handle localhost 8080/myapp. This is application identification and /. So this is the method that will handle this URL. Now, if you happen to have myapp/vets, then we need to have another method that should have request mapping value set with the vets. Okay, so this request URL will be handled by this method. This request URL will be handled by this method. Okay. Okay, moving forward. All right, so we're gonna do our first exercise. So for those of you who are new to jpassion.com Codecamp, so basically all you have to do is just download this lab here. So you're gonna actually download this lab. It's a zip file and you unzip it someplace. I have already done that. So I have already unzipped in labs. I have downloaded into this labs directory. So you can download it any place of your choice, and then you're going to unzip it. So I have already unzipped it. So I use jar xvf and this part1 zip file. So let me unzip it again. And it should create what is called the Spring MVC controller part1 directory. Underneath, you are going to see index.html file, and that is basically the lab documentation. So I'm going to actually go to read, go to see, in my case, go to labs, and Spring 4 MVC controller part1. And as you can see, we have index.html file. That is a lab documentation. And the sample applications are on the samples boot and samples XML deprecated. So we are not going to actually, so this samples XML deprecated contains XML configuration based sample application, but we are not going to actually use XML version moving forward. So we're going to actually use samples boot later on. For now, just get the documentation first. Okay, so open that index.html file, and this is the lab documentation. So in this exercise, what we're going to do is we are going to actually build sample hello world application, Spring 4 MVC application step by step. Okay, so we are going to actually use what is called the Spring MVC starter project. I assume everyone has STS. Okay, so this is STS, and again you can use any IDE of your choice. Okay, so as long as those IDEs have Maven support, that's only requirement we have. Okay, all right, so we're going to create a brand new project, file, new, and we're going to take advantage of Spring Starter project. Select Spring Starter project, and then it will give you an interface, the name of the project. I'm going to say maybe MVC Hello World, something like that. Okay, and it's going to be Maven project. And the packaging, we are going to create a WAR file, okay, because we are building a web application. And then Java version, you choose whatever choice of, you should actually use at least 1.7, okay? And the group, artifact, and version and description. So these are all Maven stuff, okay? So the group, I'm gonna say com, jpassion, and maybe MVC, okay? Artifact, typically I want to give the same name as a name, even though it doesn't have to be. And version, it doesn't matter which version we use at this point. Description is just description. So, you know, maybe I would say my first Spring for MVC application. Package, again, typically you want to use the group as the same as a package, even though it doesn't have to. So this is the package under which you are going to create your code, okay? All right, so I'm gonna create this starter project, okay? And next. And now you probably see these options. You can in fact create a bunch of the applications, sample applications based on this dependencies. So here you're gonna select web and just select web, this guy. Okay, all right, and it does have a lot of other features, but we're gonna actually we are trying to build the simplest possible Hello World Spring MVC application. So just choose web here and then see what you have next. Yeah, so this is basically showing the command that is going to use. Okay, so here you can just click finish and it will create a project for you. It might actually take a little longer if you do this one for the first time, because it might actually download some files, okay? So in my case, it's gonna create under other projects, so MVC Hello World. By the way, I have actually explained all these steps here, okay? So you can just take a look at the lab documentation. I'm going to just demonstrate it first, and I'll give you guys to try this exercise step by step. So for now, you can just watch me, okay? All right, so my MVC Hello World project has been created, okay? I'm using Java perspective. I know that some of you using web perspective, so it really doesn't matter which perspective you're using. I stay with the Java, okay? So here, if you take a look at the contents of MVC Hello World application, basically we have SRC main Java, SRC main resources. Underneath, it created a package com.jpassion.mvc, and it created two files. One is the configuration application, okay, and then it does have a servlet initializer.java, and this is basically to make web. You know, this is when you select the war as the file format. This file is being added. So basically, it lets you create a web application. Okay, here MVC Hello World application is actually containing a main method and the configure method. Okay, and you know, here you can change this guy to main application if you want to. I usually actually make this guy as a main application, so I'm going to change the name to main application, main, like this, and finish. And you don't have to if you don't like to. Okay, all right, so let's see the next step we're going to do. So we are going to modify the pom.xml file. So as a default, Spring MVC application does not dictate which template technology that you're going to use, okay? And recommended template technology moving forward is the Thymeleaf. But for now, here we are going to mostly use the JSP. So in order to use a JSP, you have to add these two dependencies, okay? So I want you to copy these two dependencies and then change your pom.xml file, okay? All right, so I'll just finish. Okay, so go to pom.xml file here, and pom here, and you are going to add these two dependencies. So I'm going to add right after test. So let's just copy these two dependencies. So this is just indication that we are going to use JSP as a template, default template, okay? All right, so we modified the pom.xml file. Okay, now we are going to create our first controller code. Okay, so you know, I'm going to create my controller.java. under maybe controllers directory. So it's a good practice to have all your controllers on the controller subdirectory, but it's not required. Okay, so here I'm gonna create, I can choose either this guy or this guy. So I'm gonna just say new class, and in terms of package, since we are gonna create a controller, I'm gonna say controllers. Okay, and the name of the controller, I'm gonna call it my controller, and finish. Okay, so I have my controller on the controllers package. Okay, all right, so that's what I just did, and we are gonna add a code. So here, basically we want to have a method called hello world method. Okay, which receive model map object. This empty model map object gets created for you by the framework, and this is where we are going to add model attribute. Okay, and this is a method that handles the HTTP GET. Now we have a controller which also is annotated as a controller. That means, basically this class will play the role of a controller. So we can actually add controller here. Let me just have this guy. Okay, so I'm going to have controller. Controller, and then we are going to add request mapping, and controller, this guy. Okay, and we are going to add request mapping, this guy, and the URL fragment that we want to support is hello world. Okay, so basically we have a controller that handles any URL that start with hello world, right? Okay, and of course we have to have a method, right? So we're gonna actually create a public and string, and this is the logical view name that we're gonna actually see. So basically logical view name is my page 1. Okay, so I'm gonna actually explain it in a few minutes, and the name of the method could be anything, in fact. So I'm gonna say in this case hello world, and method we want to support is method, and that should be request method, and it should be get. Okay, so let's see whether we have import working. Let's see, request method. I'm gonna just copy this guy. Oh, okay, so it's actually not returning string. That's what it's complaining about. Okay, so it's get, and so not, we have to actually do this one in the annotation level, right? So we have to have, in this case, we have our own, let's actually create the hello method first. Okay, so here we're gonna actually have model map object, and we're gonna call it model map like this, and then here we are going to add a new attribute called the message 1. So here model map, and add attribute. Okay, so here we are going to actually do this guy, and the attribute name is going to be message 1, and attribute value is whatever value that you want to assign to that particular key. So here I'm going to just say jpassion.com, or you can actually have your name. Okay, all right. So I create a model, the attribute. Okay, and then I'm going to return logical view. So in this case, I'm going to call it my page 1. So we certainly have to create a page called the my page 1, our next step. Okay. All right, so now we have a hello world and request mapping. Yeah, so this one might not be in fact required because default is HTTP GET anyway, right? But for the sake of this exercise, we might actually add this one as well. Okay. and request method, why it doesn't like the method. Okay, so maybe I have to actually import. Okay, so import need to be done. So we have created our first controller, which contains a single method, and we are handling hello world. So it's going to handle localhost colon 8080, and then application context, maybe if you have one, or if you're using embedded Tomcat, then you don't have to actually have application context. And then after that, hello world, that will be handled by this controller. And because this guy doesn't have any request mapping is of its own, it will be handling that URL. Okay. All right. So that is our controller. Okay. Question from Mahesh: can you elaborate the model map in what it does? So we're going to actually talk quite a bit of that in the second part of this presentation. I mean, the second controller 2 part. But basically, model map is pre-built. Empty object or model map is created for you, and that is basically a model object. You can add model attribute, and this model attribute will be accessible in the JSP page. Okay, so that is in fact our next step. Next step is set the directory for the views. Now, basically we have to give an indication to the application where your JSP pages are located. In fact, there are 2 different ways. One way of doing that is to configure what is called internal resource view resolver object. Okay, so this is something we're going to actually talk about in detail in our view resolver presentation today. But for now, just assume this is a configuration indicating that JSP pages has to be located on the webinf/views directory, and the name of the JSP page is basically will end with the JSP. So you can think of this guy as a configuration. So we are going to actually add this bean into our main method here. Okay, so here, okay, so and then import. All right, so we have configured that the location of the views. So this is webinf is something that you cannot change, but view is our own. So you can actually, for views 2, then you have to create a views 2 directory. Okay, so here we're gonna just stick with the views. Okay, so now we are ready to create a view. So the view is, in this case, we have to create a mypage1.jsp page under this location. Okay, all right, so let's actually go to here. If you're using Java perspective, basically that is on the SLC and main web app. So this is where you're gonna create webinf. Okay, so here we are going to create a new web app, and then we are going to create webinf and /views directory, and underneath we are going to create mypage1.jsp. Okay, so let's do that. So here we are going to select web app directory, new, and then select file. Okay, all right, so file name is, so here we want to specify webinf and views. Okay, because that is what we specify in our configuration. And name of the file is going to be mypage1.jsp. Okay, so now we should have mypage1.jsp file on the webinf and on the views subdirectory. Okay, again, that is how we configure the location of it. So if you say views 2, then we certainly have to change this guy to views 2. Okay, all right, now the mypage1.jsp is going to be very simple. In this case, it will just access message1 model attribute, which you created here. So if you take a look at the controller code, we have created message1 model attribute with the name of, with the string value of jpassion.com. Okay, and in order to access it, you're going to use this notation, $ and curly brace. Okay, so I'm going to just copy this guy, and my page JSP file. So it will try to access message 1. It will display jpassion.com in my case, because that's what I said, jpassion.com. Okay. All right, so let's make sure we save all these changes. Okay. All right, so we've done that. And then we, by the way, whenever you make a change, if it doesn't reflect it right away, make sure you disable cache in Chrome browser. Okay. All right, now we are ready to run the application. Now we are going to run it as a Java application, and it actually makes our life a lot easier because it's a lot faster. Okay. Basically, when you run it as a Java application, it will actually run embedded Tomcat, which is in fact optimized Tomcat, small lightweight Tomcat. It runs a lot faster than the regular Tomcat. Okay, so here right click it and then run as and choose a Java application. You know, after you're done with the development and testing and everything, then you can create a WAR file. So you can say Maven install, then it will create a WAR file. Then you can certainly deploy in a regular Tomcat or you know the other app server platform. Okay. In the development, we're going to just use the embedded Tomcat. So choose Java application. So choose Java. By the way, in my case, I have something running already. So let's see. You know, in that case, it will have an address in use case. So I'm going to just stop this guy. Okay. In your case, you should not have that problem. Okay. So every time you make a change and rerun the application, you have to stop the existing embedded Tomcat. Okay. So run as and Java application. And then it will start, it will ask me what is the main method, main class. So I'm going to just say main, and in my case is a main application. So here I click, and then it will just start the embedded Tomcat. And in fact, you should be able to see something like Tomcat started on port 8080. Okay. All right. So that's done. Now you are ready to you know, take a look at the page. Okay, so I'm gonna go over here, and basically you go to localhost 8080. Okay, so it doesn't like it. Oh, so in this case, I have to actually specify hello world because that's URL. So I have to say localhost 8080, and then you say hello world. Okay, and then you should see jpassion.com, and of course you can change this guy. So whenever you make a change, jpassion.com 2. Okay, and let's see whether that it works. If you refresh the page and it doesn't work because embedded Tomcat, it doesn't actually redeploy the application. In this case, you are going to stop the application and then you're going to just run it again. Run as and Java application, and again you select your main class. And again, if you refresh the page, and you should display jpassion.com. Oops. Yeah, let me try again. Yeah, I refreshed the page before this is completely deployed. Now it's displaying jpassion.com too. Okay, so things work. Oops. Okay, so that is basically what we did. So we have to go /hello world. And okay, so that is the first exercise I want you to do. Since this is the first exercise, I'm gonna give you guys enough time to get to this point. So I'll give you maybe about 15 minutes, and of course if you guys finished earlier, we can certainly move ahead. Okay, all right, so let me just